Good day to our viewers and listening friends. Welcome to another edition of Marriage Encounter. We are delighted to be with you on the airways today. We trust that your marriages are doing well and that you are in good health. We have been discussing the wider topic of boundaries, and specifically we are talking about values, a very important area of marriage and boundaries. And we want to welcome back Dr. Brathwaite. Dr. Brathwaite, you have been out for a few weeks.
Yes,
we're delighted to have you back with us.
Yes, thank you. It's good to be back. And well, I haven't said it here, I don't think, as yet, but Happy New Year. Not so new anymore. But it's really good to be back, Doc. I've missed being on set. But I've been listening as you've shared, and we've been having a great time nonetheless. But today, looking forward to the discussion as we discuss values and their important nature in the context of marital relationships.
Well, friends, we want to begin with a word of prayer. So we invite you, if you're able to, bow your heads with us as we pray. Father, be with us. Grant us your wisdom and your peace. We are sharing today on a very important aspect of marriage and the important value of loving your spouse. We ask for your wisdom and your guidance in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen. Well, as you heard in the prayer, we are talking about the value of loving your spouse. We have been discussing values. We began by talking about the worst value ever, Dr. Brathwaite, and we said that one was the whole matter of happiness, happiness at any cost.
At any cost, yeah.
And last week,
Selfishness.
we focused on what we consider to be a primary value, that is of having love and commitment to God. And today we want to talk about loving your spouse. Of course, this is a marriage relationship that we are dealing with here. And I want to suggest, Dr. Brathwaite, that, it's one thing to say, I love my spouse.
Right.
In fact, it is expected that two people in a marriage relationship would be in love with one another.
Correct.
That is expected. That doesn't always happen. And so the question, I think, the real question is, what happens when you don't see that love? What happens when you don't see the love that you expect from your spouse, when you no longer feel loved anymore? What happens when your love disappears? That's the crucial factor.
Yeah.
We are talking about loving your spouse.
Yeah, very, very important question. Does true love disappear? I think is an important question as well. And when you talk about love, or when somebody says, I love you, sometimes, Doc, it's, that person has maybe their own ideas about what love is or what it represents. For some people, when they say I love you, they're really saying that there's a quality in you that I love. You're a very confident person. So I love that quality of your confidence, or you're romantic, and I love that quality of your romantic nature. But is that in terms of love, true love? And is that, is that sometimes what disappears?
Well, that is what I was going to ask you, Dr. Brathwaite. If the individual loves you because you are romantic or because of a particular character trait that you have, what happens when you stop exhibiting that trait?
Right. Or they get used to it.
Yeah. So do you still love the person? Right. And that brings me to this matter of a comparison between two New Testament words for love, agape and eros. I think very important. You may want to broaden on agape, but if you permit me just to say a word on eros, because the matter here is when, and I'm going back to your example because I think it's really a good example. If you love me because I'm romantic and I stop exhibiting romanticism, then do you still love me?
Right.
And the idea is a lot of times when we say we love somebody, we love them because of something.
Yep.
The eros, from which we get
erotic,
that is the kind of love that we talk about, romance and the like. A lot of times, at least in the Greek way it is written in the New Testament, it has to do with love that is a reaction to something in the object. I love this phone because it is pleasing to me.
Right.
But if it drops and breaks,
I don't love it anymore.
then it is no longer pleasing to me and I love it no longer.
Right.
That is not the kind of love that we expect between a husband and a wife.
That's right. So very importantly, you know, I just to the viewing and listening audience, you know, maybe you need to think about when you really say that you love somebody, you need to examine what you're really saying and what it really means. You know, if you're introspecting and you're being honest with yourself, do you love this person, you know, because of that beautiful gift? And oftentimes, sometimes, you know, that's what attracts you to somebody, something about them that you see or you observe and I like that about that person, you know, and it begins something. But moving from what you shared in terms of the erotic or eros to agape, you know, agape love is God's love. And if we put it in a sort of a nutshell, it is the kind of love that seeks the other's best interest. All right, and that, you know, we could probably spend the rest of the session speaking about that, right? But I'm just making the point that you know, it's not a self-seeking love. And for me, I always like to quote 1 Corinthians 13. You know, those principles that love is really all about. Love is kind, you know, it's not easily upset, it doesn't boast, it's not proud, it doesn't keep a record of wrong. You know, that's the kind of love that seeks the other's best interest. And that is sort of the love that is foundational to marriage, or ought to be foundational to successful marriages.
So when somebody says, I don't love him anymore because he doesn't make me happy,
Right.
Is that reflecting a fact that I am loving the person because of or in spite of?
Right. I mean, that definitely is because of. Because if the person in the context of the discussion no longer makes you happy, is it the happiness that drew you to that person in the first place? And now that the person is unable, for whatever reasons, and there may be some legitimate reasons why the person doesn't make you happy anymore. Maybe they have changed in terms of their own responsibility to certain things and so forth and so on. But because love is a principle, the bottom line is, even when a person may not do a lot of the things that they used to do, you know, the foundational principle of love should still exist.
Exactly. So
Right.
we are saying here, therefore, that the kind of love that should exist between a husband and a wife should not be the because of love, but the in spite of love.
Yes.
And you did mention attraction. It is quite okay. In fact, there has to be some kind of something that should attract you to your spouse.
Absolutely.
You know, but you ought not to stay there. You know, as the relationship grows, you ought to value the individual and have a commitment. And I want to introduce that word because there are going to be times when your spouse does not make you happy.
That's right,
You know,
that's
we did say a few weeks ago that you should not depend on your spouse for happiness anyway.
Right.
You know, so the idea is, it is quite in order to feel inspired when you look at your spouse. It is a good idea to be attracted to their beauty, to their character, etc. But your love must go beyond that. You ought to love them in spite of. So if your spouse gets in an accident and the beauty of her face isn't there anymore, that should not change your love for your spouse.
Right. And I like that you introduced the word commitment, because we have spoken some time ago about some aspects of commitment. Commitment is for me, a huge word and a huge principle in the context of a marriage, because we have made it very clear here, Pastor, that, you know, during the course of a marriage, and because these two people are so different, they will not always see eye to eye, and they will have differences, they will have disagreements, they will have fallouts. And when, you know, if you're married for 20, 25, 30 years and you have fallouts and so on, there might be a time a person feels like, you know, I've had enough of this. What really keeps you there? You know, that commitment to love that person in spite of and not because of. Not because sometimes they can be miserable and sometimes they can be petty and sometimes they can be, you know, whatever you want to say. But you're committed to this relationship. And you're also committed not just to the relationship, but you're committed to the relationship's growth as well. So while you may be having challenges, you'll always desire to work towards you know, a better relationship. And I think that is so important.
So friends, lest you think that we are talking about empty love here,
Right.
and the concept empty love is a concept we use to refer to a state of a marriage where there is commitment, but there is no intimacy, there is no passion.
Right.
You know, so
Transactional.
there are two individuals who simply mean that they're not going to get a divorce, but nothing is happening between them. And so that is not what we're talking about. So that you can understand the whole concept of love being a value, we want to share that there are three things that you have to take into consideration. Because what the Bible teaches is that we should love our spouses as we love ourselves, right? And there are three elements. We will not go into all of them today, but I will mention them and then we will take them one at a time, Dr. Brathwaite. First is that, you know, when we talk about loving our spouse as ourself, we are talking about that you should deeply identify with your spouse, you know, so to the point where you feel the effects of your own behavior. So deeply identify with your spouse so that you feel the effects of your behavior on your spouse. Secondly, we are talking about the whole matter of not just identifying with your spouse, but you want to go beyond that to the identity. You want what is best for your spouse, even when you can't see what it is. Now, I kind of jumped one there, so let me just back up a little bit. First, you deeply identify with your spouse. Secondly, you think first of making your spouse's life better. And third, you want the best for your spouse. Now, Doc, if we can take these in turn, maybe we only have time today, maybe not even enough time for the first one. You deeply identify with your spouse, that you feel, I mean, you so deeply identify with them that you can feel the effects of your behavior on your spouse.
Right, very important, you know, because, well, you know, as the Bible says, the two shall become one. And if you value the relationship with your spouse, because we're talking about valuing, we said God, value God, now we're valuing our spouse. That means that this person who you've invited to be a part of your life is a part of your entire makeup. You know, we talk about value systems and we talk about the things that guide us through our lives. When you recognize loving your spouse as a value in your internal makeup, it simply means that, you know, sort of, again, what the Bible shares, do unto others as you would that they would do unto you. You understand that your actions impact your spouse in such a way that you would want to put yourself in your spouse's shoes when you're about to act. So you want to, when you act and you're acting upon, you want to also consider, how will I feel if I were to do that same thing?
So let's make this practical, Dr. Brathwaite, because, you know, sometimes spouses complain that their partner, their husband, or most times the man, is coming home increasingly late.
Yes.
And so here's a couple, they're married, and they have no children yet, early in the marriage, and the man is playing dominoes on the block with his friends, and he is coming home at 11. First it was 10:30, then it became 11:15, then 12, 1 o'clock. And she's complaining. What are we saying, therefore, that if you so deeply identify with your spouse, that means that you are thinking of your spouse. You're going to be considering, when I stay out this long and leave my spouse at home, how would I feel if I was my spouse and my partner is out on the block with friends and I'm all lonely here by myself?
That's exactly what we're saying. Just, you think about it and think about, you know, maybe the concern that might be going through your mind as to whether the person is safe, especially if there's not much communication taking place, you know, while the person is out. And then thinking about the female who, in terms of their greatest need, is one of security, right? So there she is in the house, maybe with the child, alone until 1 o'clock in the morning. And the emotional stress of that, you understand? You putting yourself in your spouse's position, you would I think be motivated to suggest to the boys, listen, I gotta leave, you know, now, to get home. And of course, you know how guys are. Guys might, as we say in Antigua, grind you a little bit.
A little bit.
But the point is, you know, you have a greater appreciation for, you know, taking care of your spouse.
And, you know, I think it's really very important for us to consider this. Because, as you said, the guys may rub it in a little bit, you know, and may even call you some words.
Right.
You know, you have to make your spouse a priority. You know, it's a matter of importance. Who has greater value in your life? And so, am I going to make the fellows in the block feel happy? You know, now that goes back to the worst value ever.
That's right.
Because if it is about me having fun at any cost, then I don't care whether my spouse is at home cold and
That's right.
and doesn't have a shoulder to lean on. I just want to enjoy myself. That
so
is
good.
looking out for your own interest. But now when you consider, when you are so closely connected with your spouse that you can empathize,
Yes.
because that's
Yes.
the real word,
Yes.
empathy. When you can
Empathy.
put yourself in your partner's shoes and,
Yes.
and tell yourself, you know, if I were there, how would I feel? If it's a gentleman, let me ask you, how would you feel if your wife were to decide, you know what, I can't come to bed with you until 2 o'clock in the morning. You know, that is when I have energy. I want to stay up and cook and wash and clean.
Right.
And you know that you have to go to sleep by yourself every night. And that may frustrate you.
Right,
You know,
right.
so it's about flipping
Yes.
to the other side and
Considering.
sensing what it would be like.
Yeah, I think you made an amazing connection just a moment ago when you indicated that, you know, when a person functions in the example that you gave, like, you know, the domino player who stays out that late, they're thinking about their own happiness at any cost. And as you said, you know, for them, whether my spouse is home alone or not, that doesn't make a difference. Cloud and Townsend, in their discussion, used the word here, selfishness. And, you know, I think sometimes, you know, as spouses, we have to consider of ourselves, are we really being selfish? Are we really just considering our own happiness? And, you know, human nature tends to lead in that direction, Doc, where persons are considering only their own happiness when they make a choice. It's a feel-good moment. I feel good about this. I feel good. I'm out playing dominoes with the boys and I'm winning, you know, I'm jailing this person and I feel good. You know, it gives me a feel-good feeling. But that can be considered oftentimes as just being selfish to the point where you're not even considering, you know, the impact that it is having on your spouse. You know, when you spend money inappropriately, same thing. You know, you bought something, you had other plans for the money, but you bought this thing and it made you feel good. You bought a tool, you bought you know, wife went out and bought a new washing machine when the one day, although it was giving some problems, was still, you understand? And it's, I'm doing this because I want this right now, sometimes at the expense of the other person in the relationship.
So we need to get beyond the behavior and begin to focus on the effects of the behavior.
Yes.
You know, in the moment where I am slamming the dominoes on the table, or in the moment when, if you're a woman, you're in the store and you're shopping, you're buying that new dress, even though the finances are not in the best order, but it makes you feel happy. After all, you're going to a wedding and you want to have on something special, and so you feel that excitement. What we're saying is that, remember, we're considering the effect of your behavior on the relationship.
Yes.
Right? So you want to be able to identify with your spouse to the point where you consider the effects of your behavior on the relationship. So when you are tempted to do this thing, you want to ask the question, how will this affect my spouse? You know, how will this make my spouse feel? And if I were in my spouse's shoes, would I really enjoy this?
Right.
You know, would I really like to be treated this way?
That's right.
I think that's a very important principle
Very, very,
that married partners need to follow.
Very, very important. And
You know, the matter of stepping into your partner's shoes, if you could spend a little time on that, you know, because it's easy to say, but in reality, what are we really talking about? We're talking about your spouse now deciding, let me try to be my partner for a moment and think like my partner and try to see how this would impact my partner.
Yeah, that's exactly what you're trying to do. You are attempting to also, as we say, empathy, you're entering into the feelings of another. So when I use the example of understanding how women, their greatest need is for security, you're entering into that emotion, into that experience. You're saying to yourself, because for men, our greatest need is not the need for security. A man might be out there on the street at 12, 1 o'clock and feel perfectly safe.
Yes.
So you have to move yourself out of that zone now and place yourself into the environment where, that woman feels insecure at home and say, you know what, I might feel all right, but I know she's not okay. So let me go and take care of her. For a man, the issue might be one of vulnerability or not feeling. A man might feel a little intimidated by his wife if he doesn't feel, in the context, one of the greatest needs of a man is sexual fulfillment, if he doesn't feel like he's been able to fulfill his wife. And his wife now, turns to him and makes certain comments about maybe, you haven't grown up yet, you behave like a child. That messes with his ego, okay? And making those comments, she would have to put herself in his position and say, you know what, if I make that comment, that's not going to be very helpful to how my husband performs. So, maybe I need to hold back on that, that type of thinking.
So I want to go back because I think to empathize is different from sympathizing.
Yes, it is. It is.
And so you mentioned that one of a woman's needs may be security.
Yes.
So here's a man, he's out liming with his friends, and he thinks about his wife, and he says, or maybe she misses me, so I'm going to go home.
Right.
But he has to think she's insecure.
Yes.
She feels afraid at home. She's concerned that somebody might break in the house and do something. He now has to consider that. How would it feel if I were to be truly afraid?
Right.
There is this threat. Maybe he may have to imagine himself walking someplace where maybe there is a phobia that he has and he's in the midst of that, to get a sense of what his wife may be going through.
Yeah.
Because empathizing means that you are living the experience of your spouse.
Yes.
So you can identify with their feeling. Right. So you must not just glance at it. Try to make it real. Say, what emotions are my wife struggling with when I'm out here playing dominoes?
Yeah.
Is she lonely? Have I ever felt lonely? What it is to be lonely?
Alone, yeah.
That's what my wife is going through. Do I really think I would enjoy being so lonely? Right. No? Well, let me do something about it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, very, very important. I mean, and I want to make a point here because, the work of a marriage is really the work of a lifetime. And, being able to do what we're talking about, Doc, in terms of entering into empathizing, it's an emotional work, right? It may even be quite draining. But that's why I say that a marriage is the work of a lifetime, because as you do it over a period of time, in the early years of your marriage, you begin to understand your spouse. You begin to understand your spouse more and more and more, to the point where you don't have to be so emotionally engaged now, because you can appreciate some of her experiences on the matter of security. Immediately, as you see time get into a certain place, you understand, look, I don't even have to think about this anymore. I just need to go and be with my spouse or ensure that she's safe, and that, reduces the burden of the emotional work that you have to do later down in life. So the point I'm making is, in the earlies, yes, it's emotional. It might be quite draining. It might be quite tiring. Getting to understand your spouse, learning how she feels about certain things, and responding to those positively in an empathetic way. But as time goes by, you build confidence, and you're able to sort of just do it just like that.
Well, the technical folks are telling us that our time is up.
Wow.
So we are going to have to wrap it up right here.
Yeah.
Really wanted us to expand on that very important point there a little more. But we're going to have to stay here for today. Radio friends, and those viewing on the net, we want to really encourage you to get your spouse to listen in on this, because it is very important. We're going to be back here next week again, same time. As you may have heard, for those of you who listen on Second Advent Radio, our time has changed from 9:30 from, was it 9:30?
9:30,
From
yes.
9:30 on Thursday mornings to 10:30. So we're 1 hour later. We want you to make a special effort. We are still on 6:30 on Thursday afternoons and 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoons. But please share with your friends how important this is. That's all our time. May God bless you. Until next week.